Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well. This is Lesson 8, ArrayList. In this lesson, we will be revisiting import statements, talking about array lists in terms of declaration and instantiation, the different methods that are part of the ArrayList class. We will also be talking about printing out the element in the array list and looping through the array list. So, in the last unit, we learned about arrays to hold collections of related data. But arrays have limitations. The size of an array is established at the time of creation and cannot be changed. What if you don't know how big the collection of data will be? What if you want to add and remove items from the collection and change the size of the collection while the program is running? For example, if you wanted to represent a shopping list, you might add to the list throughout the week and remove things from the list while you are shopping. You probably would not know how many items will be on the list at the beginning of the week. Luckily, Java has a class called ArrayList, which is a resizable array. An array list has an underlying array that grows or shrinks as needed. You can use ArrayList instead of arrays whenever you don't know the size of the array you need, or you know that you will add and remove items, changing the array size dynamically during runtime. An array list is mutable, meaning it can change during runtime by adding and removing objects from it. Alright, so let's dive into the code. So we're going to first open up this folder where we have saved everything, and then we're going to want to launch the package. Alright, and just so we're going to remove this arrow so that we don't have any confusion, I'm just going to delete this part about all of this because we don't need any of that. Alright, so now that Lesson 7 folder is all cleared up, let's go over to the Lesson 8 folder. And that is what we are going to create. And here is our class. So we just want to open the editor. We're going to do public class lesson underscore 8. All of this you should be familiar with. And then we're going to do our main method. Public static void main string args. Whoops. Wrong place. There we go. All right. So first, we need to revisit import statements. So ArrayList is not built in with the standard Java platform. So, with arrays, we could just type them in like no problem, like it's another object, right? We could go like hi and 7, right? We don't have to import any statement. We're using a class that has already been built into the original Java platform. But ArrayList is not part of it originally. We have to import it. Just like the scanner class. Remember, we had to do import java.util.scanner? Well, this one, we are going to do import java.util.ArrayList. Alright? And then say we wanted the scanner class, we could either just go do that, java.util.scanner, right? But I generally don't like writing everything out. I'm using a bunch of stuff from the util place of Java, so I thought, why not download everything, import everything that's within the util index. So we'll do import java.util.star. This star basically means that it will import everything that is part of the util base. Alright? So now when we have the star, this includes that ArrayList has been imported and the scanner class has been imported. We don't have to import anything else from the util base. Alright? So now that we've imported the ArrayList class, let's talk about ArrayList. So remember, if you remember from our previous lessons, we had wrapper classes. So we could do int I equals 0, right? That's how you can create integers. But remember, we talked about wrapper classes as well. We had integer I equals new integer, and then we had like a 0 or something, right? That is what ArrayList will utilize. It will utilize the wrapper classes of every primitive type, and of course, object club don't have wrapper classes. The class is the wrapper class, so we don't really have to worry about it when we're doing object variables, but for primitive variables, we want to be using the wrapper class, just like we have a double wrapper class or we have a string wrapper class. So that's how we're going to do it. So whenever we create an array list, this is the syntax. So we do array list. This should seem pretty standard because we're putting the class first. Then we have this. And inside these, we're going to put in the wrapper class. You're used to maybe seeing int. We're going to put like int like that, but we have to put integer. So that's how the first part of it looks like. Then we have to give it a name. So let's just say shopping list. We'll use the same example we talked about previously. We're going to do new, right? That seems pretty standard. Then array list. Same, we're using integer class. And then we'll just add this. So within the array list class, do you see these parentheses, right? This is how we access the constructor. So the default constructor sets the size of the array list to 0. But we can also have another initial capacity. Say we wanted to have 5 elements at first, right? We can do that. But generally, I like to keep it at 0 because we're just going to be adding elements as we go. So we can do it for integers. We can do the same thing for string, right? So array list string. And we'll just say shopping items, right? That can be in the integers. So we're going to do array list. And we're going to do string. Right, and we can even have doubles. Array list, double. Remember, we're using the wrapper class, so that's why this D has to be capitalized instead of lowercase, how it usually is. So we'll have to do that. And I'll just name this item cost, right? Because that's usually in decimals. So array list, and we'll have double. All right, pretty simple. Okay, now let's talk about some of the methods. But before we get into the methods, remember we can also do it of the date class. So say I wanted to create an array list of the date class. We can do that as well. Same thing as in array, except we're creating an array list of the date class. So we're going to have several date objects. So we'll just have this data list, and we'll have date. And we'll set the initial capacity at 0. We can either type in 0 or leave it blank. Remember? So let's get into it. So first what we're going to do is talk about null. So if you remember, if we don't have this, right, it's null, right? It's basically null if we just have this. Same thing. Because it has not been instantiated yet. So if you try printing this out, it's just going to return you null, right? Because we haven't instantiated an object yet. We haven't given it the directions that it needs to get to the array list object. All right? Hope that made sense. So we'll add this back. And we're first going to be using this. So I don't want you guys to worry about any of these right now. Any of those statements. We'll get back to that. So first thing we want to do, remember in arrays, right, we say we had int hi equals new, and I'll just use it this, like 6, 7, 8, right? And then if we wanted to get the length of the array, right, we could just call hi.length, right? That would give us the length. So I'll just print that out for all you guys. So put more parentheses and print out just fine. Right, 3, because that is the length of the array. Well, so if dot length works like this, then in array list we should just be able to do shopping list dot length, right? That should work. Wrong. An array list has a separate method for it. In arrays, we were just using a variable, right? Because in strings, we have the parentheses because we're using a method, but in arrays, all we're doing is a variable. But the ArrayList class, it has a method, similar to string, but it's not called .length. We can't just do shopping list .length. No, that won't work. We have a separate method, and it's called size, and we need the parentheses this time. So that should return us 0 because our initial capacity right now is 0. Pretty simple. You just have to differentiate between .length and .size, and .size is a method while .length is actually just a variable within the array class. Alright, now let's talk about, how do we add stuff to this array list? Well, that's a good question. So we have a separate method for that, and it's called the add method. Now this add method, it has been overloaded, and if you remember what that means is that there are two .add methods. There's one that has one parameter, and there's a method that can be called that has two parameters. So let's first talk about the parameter that has one, the method that has one parameter. So for this array list, we first call shopping list because that's the object. And then we have dot. Remember, with the dot, we have to have an object on the left side, and on the right side, we have to have a method of the class which this object is an instance of. So a method of the ArrayList class is the add method, like I had said before, and we're going to do one parameter. And this parameter has to be of the type of the ArrayList. So since this is an integer ArrayList, this parameter has to be an integer. If this was a string array, then this would have to be a string that we add in the parameter. Same thing with doubles, same thing with date. So since this is an integer, we're just going to add like 5, right? We'll just add any random integer. All right. So here we are. It should add one element of 5. So let me show you what this array list looks like now. So it right now looks like 5. That's it. It only has one element. So whenever we print out the size of it, it should return 1. So let's print it out and see if we are correct. All right, it printed out 1. And we can keep going. So now if we do it again, one parameter, it adds the element to the end of the array list. The reason why it didn't matter when we had an empty array is because the end is nothing. So we just add it right there. But whenever we add this 6, the 6 does not go over here. It is added to the end of it. So if we add another element, it's just going to be after this, after this, after this. It's going to just keep going. That makes sense. So that's all you need to remember about the one parameter add method. Now, what about the two parameter add method? Well, remember how we had talked about that everything has indexes? Well, an ArrayList also has indexes. So this is right now at index 0. This is at index 1. Say we try to add in another one, and we'll just add in 9 or something, right? Then we're going to have to add a 9, and that'll be at index 2, right? It just keeps getting added to the next index. But if we say we put in a parameter of 0, this parameter is always an integer because an index is always an integer. So this first one is going to represent the index where we want to place the element, and this is the actual element. This, again, depends on whatever the type of the array list is. So since we're using integer, it's going to be an integer. If it was string, then this element would be string. But this first parameter is always an integer because we are referencing the index with that parameter. So say we had this. What was this look like? All right. Let's have our empty array first. All right, dot add 5. All right, that should just add 5 here because it adds it to the end, and since there's nothing, that's all there is. Now, add at the index of 0. All right, the index of 0, that's 5 right now, but we want whatever's at the index of 0 to be the value of 6. So what we're going to have to do is add 6 over here and push 5 to the right because 5 is no longer the priority, it's just 6. So 5 is now going to be pushed to index 1. All right, and say we wanted to add this also at index 0. All right, Well, now this statement takes priority. So we want whatever is at index 0 to have the value of 9. So what's going to happen is all of these values are going to be pushed to the right because we need the value of at index 0 to be 9. So we're going to have 9, and both of these are going to be pushed to the right. So the index of the value 6 is now 1, and the index of the element 5 in this array list is 2. All right, that should make sense. And say we wanted to add another one, right? But we'll have a parameter of 1, and I want to add, let's say, 8. All right, so this is a priority. So we need to go at index 1. All right, that right now has 6, but we want it to be 8. All right, so we add 8, and all of these get pushed over to the side. So now the element 6 is at index 2, and the element 5 is at index 3. See? That's how an array list expands, and that's how you add elements to an array. All right, the next thing that we need to talk about is the .remove method. So I hope you guys understood the 1 parameter and 2 parameter add methods. So now for the remove one, say we have, this is our array list, right? It looks exactly like this. We went through and traced all of this code, and this is the array list that was produced. So let's go through it. So say we have shopping list dot remove, and what remove only has one remove method. All we're gonna have is just one parameter, and it is going to be an integer. All that we need to add in the remove method is the index. So it's pretty simple. We want to remove the element at index 2, all right? So we just put in 2, and what's exactly going to happen is this element is going to be removed from index 2, and 5 gets pushed back. So in add, everything got pushed over to the right, but in remove, everything gets pushed over to the left. So now 5 comes at index 2, and this 3 is gone. The size is going to be 2 now, because all we have, the size is going to be 3, because all we have is 3 elements. So let's give it a try. 3, right? And say we commented this out, we didn't remove anything, then size is going to be 4. See? So all you have to put here is just the index at which you want removed. So now now that we've talked about adding specific elements, how do we get a specific element? Well, to get an element, all you have to do is call shopping list dot get, and then all we need is just one parameter, and it's the same as the remove, the index. So I want to get whatever's at the index at 2. So we put in the parameter at 2, and there we go. So what it should end up printing out is the element at index 2, which is 5. All right, let's give it a try. So remember in arrays, so say if we had an array, int I equals new int 6, right? We'll have just a size of 6. And say we wanted to get whatever's at index 2, we'd have to do high this. That's how we'd get what's at index 2. But to get the element at index 2, we have to call a .get method in the ArrayList class. All right? Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so that's just, so get simple method is pretty simple. Now we need to talk about set. So in order to set the index at 2, we just call the same thing, and we just assign it to a specific value. Pretty simple, right? And to get it, all we have to do is just this. We just use the same statement. But in ArrayList, we can't just call shoppinglist.get equals 9. No, that does not work. There's a separate method you have to use, and what we use for that method is shoppinglist.set, because we're setting the value at what the index is. So say I want to change the value at whatever's at index 1. So we have 2 parameters within the set method. we're first going to have the index, and then we are going to have the specific value that we want it changed to. So it's the same thing how this add to parameter method works. So we're first going to have our integer index, and then we're going to have whatever value of whatever the array list is of the type. So since we're using integers, we're just going to do, we want to set the index at 0 to, let's say, 7 now. So what that's going to do is we're going to go over to index at 0, and we're going to print out 7. Now, originally, what was added was 9. So this is not a void method. This will actually return something back to the user. What it will return is the value that was set, that was changed. So it's gonna so when it changes to 7, but it was originally 9. So the value that's gonna be saved here is now 9. So high is now 9. So let's put that in our print statement. To print out 9, and the array list at index 0 should be set to 7 now. So let's give it a try. Yep. 7. So reason why I printed out 7 is because that's what's over there now. So that's what at index 0 now. All right. And the reason for that is because I forgot to remove this statement. So now it should print out 9. There we go, 9. So the reason why it originally threw 7 is because that is the value that I had originally, because I had called the set statement to 7, and then I called set again. So when 7 is replaced with 7, 7 is returned because 7 was the value that was replaced. It was basically a useless method. All it was doing is replacing the value with the same value. So, and the remove method does the same thing. So say we're back to 9, because that's what it is according to this, and then the remove method will also return a specific value. The remove method will return the value of whatever was removed. So let's create our array again. So up here, we have first 5. Then we add at index 0, 6. Add at index 0, 9. And then at index 1, we added an 8. All right. And then we have index 3. All right. And then we removed whatever's at index 2. So this element is now removed. So 6 was removed, and 6 is the value that's going to be returned. So it just returns the value of whatever was removed. Just so you have it. So 6, like we said before. So most people don't usually use that. Most people just go over here and treat it like a void method, because we don't have to save it. We can just, call it, and it'll just remove the element. And we can do all of these same things with any of these array lists. So let's go through it and delete all of this, and we'll comment out this array, and we'll start using string, right? We can have shopping items dot add, and let's just say banana. Or I don't really like bananas, we'll have apples. And then we'll do shopping items dot add, let's just say some milk, right? And let's add one more thing. So shopping items dot add, and let's just say I need some water as well. All right. So what our array is going to look like is we're going to have apple first, then we're going to have, whoops, forgot my quotations, and then milk, and we'll have water. All right, so that's what our array list looks like, and we'll add in our indexes as well. So we have index at 0, 1, and index at 2, right? And then we can use all of those methods. Let's say we want to print it out at shopping items dot get whatever's at index 2. So what that should give us is 0, 1, 2. Whoops, misspelled this. And okay, so it should print out water. All right. And remember, for this add method, we added whatever this array list was of the type. So the type of this array list was string, so we added a parameter of a string. Works the same way. So to print it out, to print out water, like we said, and there you go, water. And we can use any of those methods. Say we wanted to just set the value at index of 2 to now, let's say, what do we want? So let's just say some oranges. All right, so this is now going to be set to oranges, and water is what's saved here, so it should print out water now. I mean oranges. So it print out water, and oranges is what was changed, because water is what was removed or changed. So the same thing can also work, let's say, if we start using a class type. Let's say we have some objects. So we have data, so that's an object of the ArrayList class, but data stores more objects. So what we need to do is data.add, and then this needs to be a date object. Well, how do we do that? Well, we can just do new date. We'll just create a new object, and I'll just have it as a default constructor. So what we've done is added a date object. You can also do this. Say we had a date, let's say temp equals new date, and let's add 5/6/2018. Whoops. All right, and then we can also just do data.add, and we can also add temp. You can do it both ways. I just prefer this method because it takes up less code to execute it. So what this array list will basically look like is hold memory addresses. So I don't really remember, we don't really need to know what the memory address is. All we need to know is where it points to. So we'll just have 2 memory addresses. Remember, it was all those random characters. And what these dots point is they point to the object, and this will point to the date object. So we can do everything as the same, and then we can also set it and get it. So say we wanted to get the day of the date class at index 1. So what would we would have to do is system.out.println, and we'd have to do data, because that's the array list, dot, and we're calling a method of the array list class, which is get, right? And get, we want the index 1, all right? So let me just put that, 1, all right? And now remember, this is still an object, right? This is still an object we have, and we need to call the method. So a method of the date class, we want to get the day. So we're just going to do .get day. It has no parameters. We'll close it out. There. Now it should work, and let me tell you the value it should return. So the index at 1 is going to be this date object, and the day is at 5. So this should print out 5. There we go. And you can like call anything you want. Say you wanted to call get month, right? We can do, so that should just return 6. And try that as well, right? 6. All right, pretty simple. And say we wanted to set it to something, data.set, want to set whatever's at index 1, and then we have to give it a new date. So I'm also just going to add a default constructor. So, Oops, I need one more parentheses. And what is it going to print out to us is in fact just the memory address of that object, because all we did is just get this. We've just gotten the memory address. So if we wanted to get the day of that object, so let's just say we can also just call get day on this entire thing. We can add all these dots because we are sure that this is an object and this is a method of the day class. So we'll get the day of the removed object, which should be 5. We'll print it out, and it should come out to 5. There you go. So with objects, you have to do a little bit more work. You have to call more methods on top of methods, because these entire sets of code end up just returning objects, and you have to call a method of the object to get actually something that the user recognizes. All right, so now that we've talked about these methods, let's talk about actually printing out array lists. So let's bring back the integer one, and we'll have shopping list dot add. I'm just going to do 2. Right, well, I'll just add a total of like 3 elements or 4. And we'll change these values to 6, 8, 4. All right, so what our array will look like now is, because do 2, 6, 8, 4, right? Because all of these are added to the last element, the last index. So let's give our indexes 1, 2, 3. Remember, all indexes start at 0, and the last index is always going to be the length of the array list minus 1. So the length is 4, minus 1 is 3, so the last index is 3. All right? So we see the array list here, but now all we can do is just print out the array. So we just print out shopping list. Now you're like, wait, but shopping list is an object, right? So it should print out the memory address. Let's give it a try. Compile, and all right. It didn't print out the memory address. It printed out the actual array list. And there is a reason for that. It's called a Tostring method. So let's go over the Tostring method really quickly. The reason why I didn't go over it inside the class lesson is because it didn't really come into play until here. I couldn't really give a proper example. So remember, if you just tried printing it out in an array, so we had int I equals new int and size 8, and say we tried to print out hi, it would just print out a memory address. So how did it print out the actual elements here? Let me show you. Yep, printed out a memory address. So how did it do that? Well, there's a Tostring method. So say we added a Tostring. So public string Tostring. So mainly every class has a Tostring method. It is like a requirement. It's not a formal requirement, but every coder usually expects to see some sort of Tostring method within the documentation of a class, and it usually has no parameters, and all it's going to do is just give us, whenever we want to print out this object, what do we want to see? Well, we want to see the day, of course, right? And we'll give it the day, right? And I'll do a \n, right? Because I want it on a new line. And then we'll do month plus month plus, and give a \n again for a new line for the year. And print whatever's in the year variable. So let's give that a try. Oops, am I missing something? Plus year, all right. So I might be missing a plus sign somewhere here. Month and year. Oops, I need a return, right? because it's returning a string, and this is the string that we want to return. All right, let's give it a try. Printing out the memory address. Still, right? But say we created a new date object. Date I equals new date. We'll just have 4/6/2020, right? All right, let's put in a random date. So what it should print out is print out hi. It should print out exactly the toString format that we have. Here we go. So in Java, without a toString method, it will just return the memory address. But whenever you try printing out the object, Java will first search through the entire class for a toString method, and then it will return whatever the toString method returns. We can do it both ways. We can either do hi.toString, or we don't need anything. So that's the unique thing about Java. Whenever you want to search, whenever it searches for the toString method, it's going to return it whenever the object does not have any method that's called. So this way it doesn't return the memory address. So the ArrayList, whatever the ArrayList toString method returns is the actual ArrayList, not the memory address. The array class does not have a toString method. That's why people don't really like arrays that much, but you can still do it with an array. Say we had an array of integers, right? And we had hi equals new int 7, right? And we print out hi, but that returns a memory address. So we can do arrays.toString, and then within the parameters, put the array, and it should just print out the array. It'll just print out zeros because we didn't put anything in the array, and those are null values. So that's the array version if you ever want toStrings. I think they must have just added it in. So just good to know. So now that we've talked about printing array lists, let's get into actual looping. So we have our array list, and remember with an array, we just did for int I equals 0, I is less than hi dot length, I plus plus, right, to loop through every element. But remember in array list, we had shopping list dot size. That's how we know get the length, right? So we don't have a dot length in array list. So now we're looping through every element within the array, and all I want to do is just print out every element. So print ln, and I want to do shopping list. Remember bracket I, right? That should work. No. Remember within array list, we had the get method. And that should print out everything. So let's give it a try. Yep, printed every element out downwards. So let's give it a C, 2684. Rep, that's correct. So pretty simple how we can loop through it. And then we can also do the same thing with a for each loop. And then this is of an integer type array, so we're going to have int temp, and then colon, and the name of this array is called shopping list. And then all we need to put over here is just temp, right? Print out the same thing. 2684, right? Remember in for each loops, this temp represents the current element that we go through. So remember, for each loops goes through it for you. The first iteration, temp will be 2. Second iteration, it'll be 6, 8, 4, until it gets through the array. So the difference again between for each loop and the standard for loop is with the standard for loop, you can get the specific index of the element, but with this, all you can get is the elements because you have no way to get what index that it's on, unless you're tracking the iterations. But it's just easier to use the standard for loop if you want to do anything using the indexes of the array list. We can also have whiles, right? We can do while, and while I is less than shopping list dot size, right? And we're just gonna put I'm gonna start it off at 0, and with every iteration, we'll just increase I by 1. So, oops, temp won't work, so we're gonna have to do shopping list dot get whatever is at the index. So the index will update every time by 1, and it should go through the entire array list because we're always checking to see if it's less than the size. The second it is equal to the size, or if it's greater than the size, then the loop will terminate, and there we go. So let's give it another try. It should print out the exact same thing. Right? 2684. All right. Say we had an array list like this. Shopping list dot add. I'll just add in another one of these statements as well. So our array list will look something like this now. Oops. All right, and we have some more indexes, 5. All right, the length of the array is now 6. So say we want to go through, this is a standard algorithm, say we want to go through and remove all the 6s within this array list. So let's go through it. For int I equals 0, I is less than shopping list dot size, right? Because we want to go through the entire array, and we'll increment it by 1 every time because we're going through every element of the array list. And what I want to do is shopping list dot remove. Well, first we're going to need an if statement to check if it's 6. So if shopping list dot get whatever's at index I is at let's see, so shopping list dot get I cannot be equals 6, right? Because we need to check if it's 6. And then if it is equal to 6, we just want to remove it. So shopping list dot remove whatever's at index I, right? Whatever the current, if the current index is, the element at the current index is 6, we want to remove whatever's at that index. So what it should essentially print out is this, right? But let's see what actually happens. Oops, I have to print out the array at the end so that we can actually see what the final array is. All right. Why is 1 6 left? I thought we got rid of all the 6s, right? It should have just been 2 8 4. Reason for that is because let's actually go through and trace this. So let's keep track of I, right? So I is currently at 0, all right? So we're over here. It's not 6, all right? So if it's not 6, whoop, there's nothing. We're just going to increment I by 1. 1 is less than 6, so we're going to keep going. All right, we're at this index. It's a 6. All right, if it's a 6, we're going to remove it, right? Well, remember, we got to keep track. The I is 1, all right? So we'll remove this 6, all right? Now, this second 6 moved over to at index 1. Remember, everything gets shifted to the left. So that second 6 is no longer at index 2, it's now at index 1. But we just looked over at index 1, and I has to go up by 1 again. So now I goes up to 2, and we have skipped the 6 because it was moved over to index 1, and we had already checked what was at index 1 and removed it. We can't remove it again. And then it'll check over here. All right, this is 6. We're going to remove that, and so on, so on, so on. So whenever 2 of the same type are together, then it will always forget whenever you do it this way. All right? If everything is getting shifted over to the left, how in the world are we supposed to actually remove all the 6s? Well, since everything is getting moved to the left and then the index is moving to the right, we need the index to move to the left and the remove to move to the left. We need them both moving in the same direction. And the way how we do that is we go start to finish. So let's bring back our array. All right, we have our array back, and we start off at the back. So we'll do shopping list.size, and then remember -1 because that's the last index. I has to be greater than equal to 0 since the first index is always 0, and I minus since we're going down. Let's give it a try now. All right, now it got rid of all the 6s. The reason is because both of them were moving in the same direction, rather than the remove method moving everything to the left and the index moving everything to the right. So let's loop through it now. So it starts off at 5, 6 minus 1 is 5. All right, so this is not 6. All right, we're gonna decrease this. This is not a 6, 8 is not 6, so bring this down to 3. All right, this is a 6. We're gonna remove this. And it doesn't matter what we all move down to 3. We're done with that. It doesn't matter what happens to any of these elements. Since all of them moved down, we thought it would matter, but it really doesn't because we've already checked through everything. We're over here. We only care about these 3 elements since we've already checked everything. So it doesn't matter what happens to these. So now we check, all right, this is also 6. We're going to remove this. And then we're over it's going to come down to 1 again. Oops, I forgot to make it 2. All right, when we removed it was 2, but now it's 1. And all right, then we go to 0. All right, it's not a 6. Then we go to -1. -1 is not greater than equal to 0. The loop terminates. All right, so that's the standard way if you want to remove a specific element from an array. Don't do it forwards to backwards. Always do it backwards to forwards if you're removing specific elements from an array. All right, and just to recap, if you want to know the difference between array and array list. Using array when you want to store several items of the same type and you know how many items will be in the array, and the items in the array won't change in order or number. Use an array list when you want to store several items of the same type and you don't know how many items you will need in the list, or when you want to remove items from the list or add items to the list while the program is running. All right, I hope you all learned something from this lesson. And again, if you did not understand any of the content within this lesson, please scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll find information regarding how to schedule a tutoring appointment. And if you have any questions about Java or computer programming in general, you can also sign up for a tutoring appointment. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.